that is one of our native, those are some of our native overstory plants. So thank you for sharing, and feel free to continue adding into our chat. Thank you to all of our supporters, all of our funders, the Atherton Family Foundation for helping us put on these webinars. Center for Getting Things Started, that's us. Umauma Farms will be featured tonight, as well as Regenerative Agroforestry Design Systems. Mahalo to the Hawaii Island Food Alliance and the Department of Health. Okay, so just to kind of get us on the same page, I wanted to start off with some definitions of agroforestry. So I was popping into the Food Hub presentation this morning, and Donna began with the USDA definition of a food hub. So in the same style, I'll begin with the USDA definition of agroforestry. So agroforestry can mean a lot of things, but the USDA defines it as the intentional integration of trees and shrubs into crop and animal farming systems to create environmental, economic, and social benefits. So I think this is a really important aspect of agroforestry, is that it's not just about producing economic abundance, it also provides environmental services. It can regenerate land, regenerate soil, as well as social benefits for those who practice it, for the families who practice it and engage in it. Another similar definition is forest farming, which is closely related to agroforestry. And this I found from one of Craig Elevich's publications on Pacific Island agroforestry. And this definition is the cultivation of high-value specialty crops under a forest canopy that is intentionally modified or maintained to provide shade levels and habitat that favor growth and enhance production levels. So this one, focuses a little bit more, this definition focuses a little bit more on the economic aspect, but it also gets into the layers and how by planting different plants together in one system, they can fill different niches in that system. You can create different microclimates in that system, and you can favor growth of different varieties of plants in different ways. So that's sort of our baseline definition, but we'll see tonight there's different ways of viewing agroforestry and practicing it. So here's a quick overview of who our presenters are going to be. First up, we have Keahi Tahon, a Hawaiian cultural practitioner and mahi'ai in Umauma here on Hawaii Island, and an agroforestry practitioner. Ala Amoe Keolanui will be presenting on cinnamon, and this is one of the items included in the local food toolkit, which some of you received. So she's going to be talking about cinnamon, their value-added products at OK Farms here in Hilo, and a little bit of history on their farm. Next up will be Ko-Ming Wei, my fellow founder of Center for Getting Things Started, and she'll be presenting on a really awesome agroforestry book, a great resource for educators, as well as anyone interested in learning more about Pacific Island agroforestry specifically. Really excited to have Sophia and Neil here from Regenerative Agroforestry Systems, and they have designed an incredible agroforestry design tool that is also specific to our ecosystem here, and really excited for them to share that with us tonight. And then finally, last but not least, Marcus Lage will be cooking from the agroforest. So he's going to show us a local Hawaii Island recipe made with hyper local ingredients, and including all of the ingredients in the toolkit tonight. Then we'll have a brief exit survey, and that will be our evening. So we'll be finishing off around 7:30. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Keahi Tahon. So Keahi is a steward of his family Aina in Umauma near Hilo, and he has been reviving Hawaiian carving traditions as a cultural practitioner. And he's going to be sharing tonight a little bit about what he's learned on his land, a bit of the history of his land, and what agroforestry looks like for him. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and pass it over to Keahi. Thanks for being here.
Aloha kako. Without further ado, okay. So he mo olelo no umama, no Keahi Tahon, that's me. Actually, before I start going on, I'm going to say one fast prayer, just because that just kind of helps ground in this practice. As Kanaka is just one normal thing to do that before we get started with anything. So, huli kako. Mako mai kapo mai nana ina pua ho ko mai loko ki ia. Po ka malama e malama ia malama mako kino e malama mako uhane malama mako unihipili a mea aha kanaka eli kapu eli noa a mama ua noa. That's just one fast one to call in the kupunas. Make sure that all we're doing is guided by them. Okay, so this is my family aina in Umama. Actually get more to the left hand side of the screen and a little bit more to the right hand side of the screen, but without getting run over by somebody asked about the best picture we could, or I guess it's the best picture Google could get as they pass by my family house. Mahalo Google for this stark picture. But this is what the land looked like back in 2011 when I was first prospecting to come back. We're gonna move kind of fast. This is her house. This is the house of my tutu, who used to live in that house I live in now. And in her older years, she was actually on quilter and on weaver, so she didn't really do much with 9 acres, um, except lease it out to the sugarcane plantations, and that's how she offset the cost of land taxes, which were now coming into effect. The person who's in the picture, yeah, was born and raised in the Hawaiian Kingdom, and by the time in 1921 that she had fought back this land from the government, the provisional government, this was trying to be turned into Hawaiian Homes Land, the first Hawaiian Homes Act. And so there's a lot of kind of history that's passed down the line since then. So just trying to make sense of it all and understand my role here has been part of the challenge. And this is what it used to look like back when, these are pictures back from like 1965 or something like that. Where this is the front yard, much of it's, super manicured, but everything that they didn't manicure themselves was all put into cultivation of sugarcane. This is the original deed. So this is four generations before my great grandma. Just how long this land has been in our family. And was important for me to go back and do this research because in the agroforestry I practice, as on carver, I'm really after the hard species, hardwood endemic and endangered species of Hawaiian wood. Yeah, stuff that people don't really hear about, and it's meant to be that way so that people don't go looking after it and cut down the last 3 or 4 species or trees. So in my dad's generation, this is the kind of stuff they did. Here he is with my nieces and nephews, with on D9, which I think weigh about 11 tons. So that's all compaction that I get to fight in my day and age. But he was clearing all the sugarcane, which had kind of overrun the house at one point, and he grew up doing sugarcane plantation stuff. Worked in the plantation until it shut down in 93, I think was when he finished that. So that's what I've been having to fight, and this is him many years later after my first round of kalo, bringing back the land and the fertility that my family all kind of thought had dissipated over the generations. That's kind of the misunderstanding of value in colonized peoples, is that we mistake money for success, because that becomes a new paradigm, and then we forget about the productivity and the blessings from the land as we continue to work it as practitioners. We see those all the time. This one historic picture of what it used to look like with all the sugarcane planted all the way up all the field, and how they used to practice. Very very what we're used to trying to fix, and that's why most of us get into agroforestry, is because of these practices that we know over time don't work. And so this was the reason I got into this. And this back in 2010 was my first introduction into Korean natural farming, and their perspective on holistic farming and what it all looked like. And I combined this with a lot of the information I got from native planters, Handy and Pukui's version of native planters. And yeah, that became everything that I knew. Biochar, microbes, fungi. That's a cassava that we pulled out, I think, after about 2 years that my friend Nate's holding. I can't remember how much the thing weighed, but we were eating cassava pancakes for weeks, man. It was ridiculous. Um, yeah, IMO, I was learning about compost teas. What else? Oh, new equipment, agroforestry. I had to go talk to some of my friends in Thailand where these tools come from because their shapes of tools aren't like tools that you can get from Home Depot and stuff that you see in the general box stores, you know. These things weigh much heavier. They're made for cutting brush. They're made for cutting and coppicing trees. They're shaped for these purposes. Those things on the top left are coconut tongs. I mean, they're just really simple and really efficient. Um, and that's kind of the things we look for all the time. Okay. Yeah. So that, there's just so much to learn when you go from traditional farming or even organic farming into agroforestry. What are you gonna do with the material after you've cut it all? What are you gonna do for fertilizing and trying to understand now that we've put in maybe we put in 7 or 8 different tree species. How do we understand all of the needs of the species while they're intercropping and working together? And so a lot of the first couple years is just planting everything and watching how they react. Korean natural farming does a really good job of explaining hmm, I'd say traditionally we call them deficiencies and maybe diseases or problems that we have with different plants. Korean natural farming has a very interesting perspective on it. Um, I'd highly recommend them to everybody just to understand like a different perspective on uh, soil. I want to say soil technology at this point, but it's just really old systems. So soil biodiversity, I guess. Elaine Ingham and all of them do a really great job of studying soil biodiversity and the soil food web. If you guys haven't heard of them, okay, let me get off the knives. But yeah, so we went from this to this. I think that was in like 1 year, and that's just what we planted. And I don't know if you guys can see everything that's in there. At this point, you can't see the long-term species, the long-term tree species. Um, I think this row even has sandalwood included. But yeah, so taro, cassava, bananas, Pacific spinach. I think we even had the Cuban oregano rolling around in there. What was it? Okinawan spinach, sisu spinach. We had Malabar spinach growing, but then we found out that it's self-seeded, and so we took that out uh, because we didn't want it going invasive, which we found out it can do here in Hawaii. Yeah, so I'm just gonna roll through some of the pictures of what came out from that first year, second year, I think by now. And if anybody has questions or you guys want to ask anything, I think that was enabled was what you guys are telling me. If you guys want to know different species of stuff, if you guys see stuff I'm not explaining. Actually, I think by now these pictures are year 2. Yep, Sun Hemp's in there. What else? Coleus, I think, is in there as a soil builder. We put Sun Hemp and I think Pigeon Pea is also in there. And there's maybe 3 or 4 different versions of Crotalaria outside of that. One was like a really low species that was easy to chop and drop. One was a tree kind of brushy, more tall growing species. And a couple were just stuff we found off the side of the road next to cattle pastures, which we thought maybe was a good idea anyway, since cattle aren't supposed to eat them. So yeah, this is year 2. You can see the kukuyas are coming up now. Kukuyas we planted as a soil builder out on Hamakua soils. For those that don't know, a lot of what needs to happen, in my opinion, is that you know, and it's not just my opinion. Science in general is pulling this way. 2014 released is the National Science Foundation released a statement saying that climate change solutions are rooted in indigenous practices. And so with that kind of thinking, we went along with that paradigm, and our, you know, as a cultural practitioner, I was always trying to uh, translate mo'olelo and understand them in very practical ways, practical, applicable ways. And so one of the things we find is that the stories of Kamapua'a, the legends of Kamapua'a, yeah, that go along Hamakua coast. Kamapua'a's kinolao is kukui. So one of his body forms, one of the things he turns himself into is kukui. In some of the deeper Tahitian mo'olelo stories, you'll find that actually his parents are these two other species that they mix together and create kukui. And so they talk about his birth as how he was born as kind of like rope. And one of the practices we use is the roots of the kukui tree can be used to make rope. And so that's kind of one of those, what do you say, poetic ways of describing natural occurrences and making them part of the family. But one of the reasons why you find that mo'olelo being across Hamakua is because that tree naturally will mine sodium, magnesium, and calcium, which are three nutrients that run away very quickly and are always very lacking in Hamakua soils. And so that combination just makes a lot of sense. And so to go back to doing agroforestry type practices, reintroduce the tree species that should have been there if it wasn't for plantation um, type of farming and that kind of monocropping, and to put back the diversity that should be in our soils so that they're regenerative, and provide for us in a exponential sense is really the goal. So this is what it looks like after 4 years, with the first row being the most dense. And I actually have I'm gonna try, but I have a quick video. Everybody see that? Okay. Yeah, so inside there you can see ice cream beans, soursop, ulu, kukui. There's wauke sticking out of there, which is mulberry. Bananas, of course. There's some coals, some milo, the iliahi's down in there somewhere. And there's also stuff mixed in there like kawila, kamani, more ulu, moringa. Yeah, we got everything. Oh, jackfruit's in there somewhere. So, you know, and that's just what I could think of um, when I was first learning about this 8 or 9 years ago. So who knows what's in the future? There's still a bunch more acres to cover. Cool. Mahalo, everybody.
Right, mahalo Keahi. If anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll try and get to them. Yeah, thank you for sharing about, you know, the history of the land as well. Some of the themes I noticed in what you're talking about is understanding what happened on that land before you got there. And what are the stories of that place before you got there? And what can you glean from that history? Thinking about plantation agriculture and the kind of residues that leaves behind, the compaction that it causes, and how can we remedy that? Looking at mo'olelo and the wisdoms that are contained within them about our plants that we can be growing and planting and cultivating. The diversity of species that you have going on, and also how quickly you can really get this kind of system going. Within the first year, you're planting a lot of those low growing species, but you're also planting your long-term trees, which take a few years longer, but you can have a diversity in a really quick amount of time. Also, you mentioned soil builders and soil biodiversity. So always thinking about the soil, right? Adding that organic matter into the soil, and diversity seems to be a big theme. So mahalo. Thank you so much. All right. And so up next, we have another farmer, Ala Amoy Keola Nui of OK Farms in Hilo, is here to share with us a bit about their cinnamon, their value-added products. And Ala Amoy was an educator with Kamehameha Schools for 11 years, but the farm was growing. In 2012, she made the switch over to work full-time with her husband on the farm. And they lead farm tours, they do a lot of value-added products. And this past year, they expanded into a CSA and growing vegetable crops as well. So Ala, if you're here, I will just go ahead and pass it over to you.
I'm here.
Aloha.
How's it, everybody? Yeah, Carly, mahalo nui for having me. So I'll just share a little bit, just a little blurb about OK Farms, how we started, what we're doing, and what we're continuing to planning on doing. And so the land that we are farming on, it was all coal or sugarcane, and it was mostly farmed by Seabrewer Sugar Plantation. So unfortunately, you know, when coal started to go downhill in the mid 1990s, our longtime family friend, Mr. Ed Olson, who is also our business partner, he got a hold of Troy and told him, look, I want to buy this parcel of ag land and I want you to be the guy, you know, just get rid of all the coal. Unfortunately, it's just not sustainable or to do commercial wise to sell it. And so we took out all of that. We let the land heal for a couple of years. And then in 1999, the property was purchased, and 2002, we opened it up and started growing foods. We're mostly tree crops, meaning macadamia nuts, coffee, a bunch of citruses, tropical fruits, spices, cacao, and heart of palm. When the pandemic hit a couple of years ago, we decided to start venturing out. We heard a lot from the community that, you know, there was just a hard time on getting food to them, and especially for our kupuna. And so that was a concern for us. And also farmers were needing help, you know, selling their crops because the hotels, the stores, restaurants, everybody pretty much shut down all of a sudden. And so we wanted to do something positive, and our daughter Kea along with us, came up with doing CSA farm boxes, which stands for Community Supported Agriculture. And we're still doing that to this day. Every Tuesdays is our distribution day here at OK Farms. So from tree crops, now we're doing vegetables. It was a venture and it's a new journey for us, but we're pretty excited and we've got a good response from the community over the years. And so, sorry, I had to tell my son, hold up. So yeah, we're continuing to serve our community. What I was asked to talk about is what we grow, or cinnamon, or what type of cinnamon that we grow. So honestly, we just wanted to make a road called Spice Road. And on that road, we wanted to have spices. So this was back in 2004. And we didn't really know much about spices. And so, you know, I did a little research and I also talked to Planted Hawaii. They're located in Mountain View. And we came up with what kind of spices would do good here. And so it was really just a trial and error thing. And let's just see how it grows. And it does so well here. So besides our Ceylon cinnamon, we also grow cloves, curry leaf, nutmeg, and allspice. We currently have bay leaf, keiki bay leaf plants, and we still want to continue adding to Spice Road. Like Carly mentioned, yes, I was with Kamehameha Hawaii campus, and I came here in 2013 to work on our family farm. And one of my kuleana is to create value-added products. And so when I came to the farm, I saw the spice trees and how they're flourishing, and I said, look, we got to do something about it. You know, let's start turning them into food consumption. Let me work on this medicinal value. I can look into that. And also let's, you know, let's get the community involved and see their responses. And so my husband is the one that actually cuts down the cinnamon. And so I'm sorry, I don't have any pictures or anything. And I had a full day, so I'm kind of in and out with what's going on outside. But if you know Ceylon cinnamon, it can grow pretty big. And there's usually two types that's imported here, which is Ceylon and Cassia. Cassia is from China, Ceylon from Sri Lanka. And Sri Lanka has forests and forests of beautiful Ceylon cinnamon. We don't have that, and we just have a couple of them. And so if you can imagine, I wish I had a picture, but this big tree and the branches, every part of the cinnamon, from the bark to the meat, to the leaves, to the stems, every part has a piece of cinnamon in it. And so my husband usually will cut the hands, we call all the barks hands or the branches hands. he'll cut it and then he'll bring it back to me at the warehouse, and then I start the process. And the process of cinnamon is I have to clean off all the moss and all the lichen. It's natural in our state of Hawaii just because of the moisture. So I have to clean all of that off. And then after I clean it, then I have this bench grinder wire, old school, and I just go back and forth along the wire. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to make a break through the outer bark to get to that meat of cinnamon. So once I see that cinnamon strip or the meat, then I just, continue turning. After that, then it gets dirty. I got to wipe it with a towel because it will leave remnants of the bark and the moss and all of that. Then I upright my pieces depending on how big, and I can get stumps, huge stumps. And once I do that, then I get my carving knife, and if you can imagine, it's right here, and I'll just make pukas on the top. And then after that, I start carving the cinnamon off of the inner bark. It is it's quite a process, but I like working with pieces of wood, and I love wood crafting and shaping, and I wish I was a wood carver, but I'm not. This is the closest I'll probably get to it. But once I get all that cinnamon meat off, and I can get from slabs to shavings or to little sticks. And so once I do that, the cinnamon is ready now to be dried. We did dry it in our greenhouse, but the weather here, unpredictable, a lot of rain. And so the moisture gets to it and it starts to mold. And we're food safety certified, so we can't be having that. And so what we do now is we dehydrate our cinnamon. And so we have a dehydrator, and I'll either, dry the whole slab, or I'll cut it up. And that's how you can make cinnamon sticks, because when they dry naturally, or when they dry, they naturally fold in. Or the shavings, I'll just dry that, and then I'll grind it up and put it as ground cinnamon. So just to show you guys a little bit of what I'm talking about is, so these cinnamon sticks, they are used in our citrus spice tea. Okay, so this is a stick. You can see how it folds right in. It's not perfect. These again are used for my my citrus spice teas. And so right here, nice one, super easy. I love working with cinnamon. I love working with any trees. And these guys are actually in our citrus spice tea packet. This is compostable. And in the packet, we have what on the farm, which is we have some ginger, and then we have some Eureka lemon, some Tahitian lime, grapefruit, cinnamon leaf, some whole cloves, if you can see it good. And then we have some cinnamon sticks and some cinnamon shavings inside. So this is a value-added product that I started. I also sell the cinnamon, ground cinnamon. So we have this available. All of our things are available here at our farm store and online. And then also Abundant Life and Island Naturals, they carry our cinnamon for us. I also, so this is it right here. This is like pure gold, good stuff. I also do essential oils. So I'm a small-time distiller. I'm not a professional. I was blessed to meet a world-renowned distiller, Ann Harmon. She's from Seattle, and she actually taught me how to distill. And her counterpart, Lely, who is on Maui, she gave me a 20-liter copper still. And so I extract the essential oils and I turn it into hydrosol. All right, and so this is a cinnamon hydrosol. And mainly what this is for, it's anti-inflammatory properties, has antifungal properties, breath freshener. People like to use them as aromatherapy. But along with this as a hydrosol, I also have clove hydrosol and lavender hydrosol. I'll just tell you, my number one hydrosol is the clove, good for fire ant bites, mosquito bites, cuts, burns, bruises, cold sore, all the fun stuff. But in a nutshell, yes, this is short of what the many things that we do here. And if any of you want to tour the farm or come check it out, or check out the cinnamon tree, because I don't have it with me right now, we're inside, but please feel free to get in touch with Carly. She has my contact, my email, and then just shoot me an email. We're also on social media, Facebook and Instagram. You can always reach out to us there. Yeah.
Mahalo, Ala. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's much more we could get into. But yeah, I loved hearing about how one thing that stuck out is, you know, the trial and error, right? This is an important piece of farming here is you just got to see what grows. You got to try some things out. Same with keahi. Sometimes you plant Malabar chestnut and then you realize it can go invasive. And so maybe you dig it up. And also thinking about all the high value spices that you mentioned, you know, all of those are tree crops. And so they're perennial, and they also have the ability to, you know, to be export. They're high value. They're things that we mostly import. So a big piece of replacing our for food security, doing that local substitution of those awesome spices. And then also the processing. So this is another important piece to agroforestry is, okay, after you grow all this stuff, now what do you do with it? And that's almost a whole other job, right? Or it is many different jobs and can be labor intensive and also trial and error. And Keahi alluded to that too, is, you know, once you plant these trees, what do you do with them? And so thinking ahead, planning ahead, and seeing what works. And yeah, and also I just love the variety of products that you're able to make with your cinnamon, you know, from the hydrosols to the tea to just straight cinnamon, and the mixing and matching of the different products too is really awesome to see and super creative. And I think that's the kind of initiative that we need to help address food security here. So
yeah, and we also make soaps. We're not big soap makers, but we're dipped into that. And it's just to, you know, like, what else can we do with our crops? You know, so that's the that we're doing over here. Like, what else?
Yes, yeah, so awesome to see. So for those of you who did get the toolkits, you do have some gold here. This is Ala's cinnamon from OK Farms, and I'll go ahead and just introduce everything else here while we have it. Let's see. Mahalo nui, Ala. Thank you so much for being here and sharing. And yes, look forward to meeting you in person next time. You also have cacao nibs in your local toolkit from Hawaiian Crown Plantation in Hilo. And then we have Māmaki tea and dried bananas from Umauma Farms, from Keahi's place in Umauma. And so Marcus, our chef today, will be cooking with all of these products in his recipe today. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and move along. I'm gonna ask Mingwei to come up next. So Ko Mingwei is a co-founder of Center for Getting Things Started. She's an educator of educators. She has created a tool with a team, an agroforestry book, and I'm gonna let her present to you all on that next. Go ahead, Mingwei.
Mahalo nui loa, Carly. So happy you have taken over the series after me doing it for so long. I'm just always excited to build capacity. All right, so I'm just going to be really quick because I want to have the time for our other guest speakers. But the tool I wanted to introduce you with is I'm going to share the screen, and then I'm also going to drop it in the chat box. So a few years ago, with a National Science Foundation grant, and those of you who can see the chat box, you can download this for free. So we were really motivated by the fact that most of our textbooks here in the Pacific, we have squirrels and oak trees. So those of you who know me know I'm like, squirrels and oak trees. We live here in Hawaii. We're in the Pacific. We need to have very place-based materials. So thanks to the National Science Foundation, we could create a series of place-based textbooks written kind of at like the middle school level, but you know, a big wide range. And one of them is Agroforest, Growing Resilient Communities. So if you get onto the site, it's a free download. So all you have to do is click on download. Then you get to this free download. And I just wanted to highlight two things in the 2 minutes I have with you. I'm just going to quickly show you the table of contents and how it relates with the speakers that are going to come after us and the speakers who came before us. So again, some of the struggles we have with the agroforest is like, what are we going to grow? When are we going to grow it? And how are we going to grow it? So written for very much the middle school level, we talk about, look at page 24, what kinds of plants grow in the agroforest. And a reminder, this is written for the Pacific Islands. So we've got Hawaii plants, Micronesian plants, Polynesian plants. We also focus on, I want to point out page 46, what other resources do we get from the agroforest? So I know this webinar is called Eating and Drinking from the Agroforest, but already, thank you, Ala from OK Farms. We get medicines. We get fertilizers. Keha'i was talking about kukui and how it builds soil, right? And building materials from the agroforest, you can get the trees. In the old days, you would get the trees to build our canoes and va'a, thatching. So just wanted to point out pages 24 onwards and also pages 46. So I'm going to scroll really quickly to it, but I just wanted to point out, if you are looking to use this for yourself, for your students, what kinds of plants grow in agroforests, large trees, medium trees, shrubs, and small trees. And our next speakers, which I'll introduce, Neil Logan and Sophia Boa, will actually share their experience of organizing, designing an agroforest. But those of you who might need some kind of tangible book to help you, written at, again, middle school level, you can use this book to then kind of make some decisions. What other things you can get from the agroforest is food, as drinks. You can get medicine, fuel, fertilizers, and building materials. So I'm gonna stop sharing. And those of you who are interested maybe in getting hard copies, do reach out to Carly or myself. We can get those to you.
All right. Does anybody have any questions so far for any of our presenters this evening? I know it's been a whirlwind of information so far. There's been some wonderful themes jumping out tonight. And one thing about the book that Mingwei just shared is, you know, that focus on the fact that agroforests provide other services besides just food and drink, right? Oh, thank you, Mingwei. And as Keahi mentioned, you know, he's growing hardwoods, he's regenerating native forests. These are things that can be used to build homes, to create arts and crafts. And they provide these amazing ecosystem services. Also the what, when, and how, right, Mingwei? Like, what do I plant, when do I plant, and how? And it can be overwhelming sometimes to think about, because these are such diverse systems. One way we can think about it is the different layers. So think about things that grow on the root level. Think about things that are growing on the kind of shrub level. And then we have like mid-level crops like Māmaki, and then our overstory crops. Let's see.
I have a question. When you're thinking about putting plants in for an agroforest, how do you take into account the altitude, or should you just not worry about it and try to grow it? And then if it grows, it grows. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Like,
Kapua, I think you do need to take into consideration about that. Yeah. So there is a line where ulu, breadfruit. I mean, you're gonna get the ulu tree and the breadfruit, but at some point around, Keha'i, help me, is like 1,700, 1,800, 1,900 feet, like 2,000 feet. With you in Lanai, Kapua, you don't have to worry about. But if you're like way up there, say for those of us on the Hamakua, I mean, on Hawaii Island, we've got Hamakua Coast, and you're trying to go up to, sorry, those of you who are not from Big Island, like up in Pauilo, like you really not able to do too much ulu or coconuts. So yes, you do want to take that into consideration. And also the altitudes and the different microclimates change how long it takes for a tree to mature. So those are things you also keep into consideration. Where you are, because I know where you are, you're going to have very few problems. So I think you can, plant what you need to. But again, it's my greatest pleasure to introduce Neil Logan and Sophia Boa. who are part of Farm Center as well as the regenerative agroforestry systems. They have worked really, really, really hard to create a tool so that the design of the agroforest can be pleasurable, simple, doable, and not overwhelming. You know, not everybody's like Keahi. It's like, I'm going to go out there and do it. You know, some of us need some hand holding. Some of us need some support. Those of you who are educators in the room, I see Kapuas here. You're like, oh, where do we start? So I really want, it's my greatest pleasure to introduce Neil and Sophia. They are a family team. They have an amazing, beautiful agroforest up in North Kohala on the big island of Hawaii. They've been at it for a while, and every time I drive by, I'm like, wow, it's even more amazing. And they've done a lot of work, I'm going to call it on the back end, you know, on the research end, on the science end of agroforest, and also to translate that information so that people like us, just ordinary people, laymen, can really use it. So I want to turn the time over now to Neil and Sophia. Thank you so much for agreeing to be part of this webinar. And we so look forward to you sharing your mana'o with us. Thank you, Neil and Sophia.
Thank you. Thank you, Mingwei. And thank you, Carly. Thank you for everyone for being here. We are really excited to share. I'm Sophia.
I'm Neil.
We started Farm Center, and then together we partnered with Craig Elovich, who's the founder of Agroforestry Net and the Homegrown Food Network. And we joined forces to develop training and curriculum for multi-story agroforestry systems in the Pacific Islands. And then we got a CIG grant with the NRCS to develop the Agroforestry X tool. And then after that, we decided to start regenerative agroforestry systems, a consulting service helping landowners to transform degraded lands into agroforests. We started out together, Neil and I, in 2008 on 6 acres of pasture on Kohala Mountain. It wasn't sugarcane, we don't think. Maybe a little bit, but mostly, I think there's pineapple, and then it was mostly grazing. It's a rain-fed pasture, so we don't have water. And when we started out, there was just very little support to really find out, except for Craig's books, of course, how to really effectively and successfully do something like transform a degraded landscape back into a functioning ecosystem, and, you know, as native as it could become. And that was our intention. And so in the process, we realized we made a lot of mistakes and learned a lot. And we really just wanted to give back to our local farmers, our local community, and to really support the local traditional indigenous knowledge and ecological knowledge that was here, and to help support that, because there's such a rich history here. So yeah, we started Farm Center to focus on helping farmers overcome obstacles to transitioning degraded lands into regenerative agroforests, and to keep supporting the traditional local wisdom around that. So we started out, like I said, in 2008, and we made a lot of mistakes. And one of the things we learned in this planting was that we really needed to have a more of an accumulation pioneer phase before we planted our precious fruit trees and our more permanent timber trees, especially where we are. It's very windy, and like I said, it's rain fed. So this was a early planting where, after the fact, we're like, oh, we really needed to have more of an established accumulation wave that we could have then cut down to feed the wood and then plant our more precious trees in. So this is a later planting, a few years later, where we did do that. And we had about 6 to 7 years of accumulation that we cut down and made beds, nests of organic matter that we planted everything in. And so yeah, there's going to be a few slides of this area.
And this time you'll notice the major difference between the last slide and this slide is that now the ground is covered in organic matter. There's no exposed dirt, whereas this one, we kind of jumped the gun we kind of got ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, we didn't have the organic matter, back at this stage to cover the dirt. We would have had to, we would have had to buy it, or so in this case we had to wait and generate it, which takes patience and time, and with our short human lives, that is something. But anyway, so it was a lot more successful. So this is after about a month, or not even, no, a few weeks. And then this is a few weeks later. And then this is about a month into it. And you can see that we have the sorghum grass that we planted in the rows, and we use that to mulch everything after we harvested our annual vegetables. So we use the sorghum, cut sorghum to feed the system, the medium term and long term species that we have growing there. We got several hundred pounds of arugula and radishes, and then here at this stage you can see the taro and tomatoes and the corn, okra. And then here, you can kind of see this area, like I said, it's on a ridge, so it's really windy. And so we had to really pay attention to the cycles of nature and succession in particular. That's how we got into this succession business. And because we needed to have nature work with us. We couldn't just add water. We had to build upon each cycle to get to the food forest abundance stage that we are, just now entering. So it takes time, and especially when you have just, limited resources with water, and you're starting out with just a pasture. This is about 8 months after that initial planting. And, you can see the vele, the turmeric, the, cassava, let's see, what else can you see? This taro.
Most of the collards and kale and arugula and stuff are gone. All that really quick stuff are gone. And now we're getting into things that are harvested at around a year or so.
And here you can see the papaya shooting through the cocoyam. This is about a year after the planting. And now there's a lot, mostly trees. So it's basically a way that you can pay for trees, reforesting. We're able to get, hundreds of pounds of kalo and manioc, and, we were able to get quite a lot of food out of this, system. And so, yeah, it's really limit is the labor, creativity, yes, all the hard work and producing value-added products. That's a whole nother job for sure. Here's some photos. On the left is an area where there was really poor soil. I think it was like blue rock underneath. And so we had some timber trees that we heavily pruned, and then basically fed all of the wood to the soil, and then replanted in there. And the same on the picture on the left is the same thing. We had some timber trees, they were just heavily flagged, and nothing would really, from the wind, and nothing would grow underneath. So we did another round of veggies underneath. We pollarded them, and then fed the wood back into the system. And this is that area on the left that was so degraded. And about 6 months after in this photo here, 6 months later, it looked like that, because it was just so much organic matter that fed the system. And we did a lot of planting, but it really thrived in a place where there was literally no soil. So that was really exciting to see. And then this is just some of the things that we've grown and made and been able to produce, and for our community and ourselves. And then this is an aerial shot of our place. And as you can see, we're a forest oasis surrounded by like 7,000 acres of pasture. So yeah, I mean, it's possible to change things if you want to. And now Neil's going to talk more about regenerative agroforestry, stratification, and succession.
So let's see, I'm going to try to give you a little more like nuts and bolts kind of stuff, just to help support your process. So here we have maybe a complicated slide, but trust me, there's a reason for all of this. you know, as agroforesters, as farmers, what we're trying to do is to work with natural succession. You know, if you were to look at, say, bare lava field, or just an open pasture, and you were to watch that area for, say, a few hundred years, what would happen? Well, what would happen is that slowly but surely, in succession, organisms would come in that would create microclimate, create habitat, and allow for something else to ultimately replace that thing, something that was more lush, demanding, and long-lived. And this occurs, you know, usually it's a pretty slow process, can take you, say, you know, a few hundred years to get up to the climax step, right? So what we do is we accelerate that process, and we try to, you know, create analog ecosystems where, you know, we fill in all of the different niches that would otherwise be filled by whatever the original ecosystem is. So we create this analog ecosystem, an agro ecosystem. And, you know, our goal is to really to allow all of the different species in the system to completely live out their lives, and fully express themselves, and go through, you know, as much of their life cycle as is appropriate for their role in the system. And what we do that, we're basically balancing, you know, numbers of individuals versus quality of life in a particular area over time, right? And so, go ahead. And so if you take, for example, this example is from Samoa. This is a traditional agroforest. In here, you have all of the layers that you would find of the forest of that place, but they've been basically swapped out with crops. And so in my next slide, I'll show you how that breaks down in terms of like the stratification. And so this color coordinated stratification system that you have here, you see here, we're going to also show you in the, we've used it in the tool. So it's the same thing. So basically the red color are things that are, you know, in the low stratum. Then you have the medium, which are the yellows, your highs in the green, and then your emergent species that break through as the blue, right? And so this is already a blueprint, a pattern that is known in indigenous systems. It's been used for thousands of years, and it's pretty successful at basically, you know, recycling nutrition in an area and maximizing the productivity of the soil. Now, something I need to tell you though, before we go any further, you know, this is all the stuff that is from our step in succession that humans are a part of, which I like to refer to as the abundance step. But there are steps that come before that step. And if you skip those steps, well, then you haven't actually, you know, fully built up the soil to support the species of the system that we belong to. So, and especially in our situation where we've had, you know, many decades of industrial agriculture that have been not kind to the soil, in order for us to realize the kinds of yields that are possible in these systems, it's very important to know the history of your soil and know what's happened there. And so very likely, depending on your situation, you may need to go through one of these accumulation steps where you basically, it will look like a crazy thicket. You will grow an enormous amount of stems per area of, you know, fast growing things that are going to produce a lot of wood. And then somehow you have to go in and organize that chaos into something meaningful, get it down on the ground where it can begin to decompose. Okay, go ahead. And so what you end up being, in essence, is a kind of conductor, the farmer who has assembled all of these different elements. And then over time, you know, you're just sort of making sure that everybody has their proper time and place. And we do a lot of pruning. And that's really what that boils down to, is lots and lots of pruning, so that we're able to keep feeding the soil, so that when you get to that step of abundance from the accumulation step, the ground should look like some of these images that you see here, covered in wood, fruiting with fungi, right? That's when you know you've arrived, if you're looking for that indicator that lets you know, okay? If you If you're not there yet when you're planting your crops, well, you're probably a little bit early, and that's when you start to have pests and problems and plagues and all that sort of stuff. But if you are in fact in step with succession, it's a cruise, it's a flow down a river, you know. And so what that kind of looks like is, you know, a change in canopy diameter and height through time. Each time you're pruning, you're liberating carbon and dropping it down to the ground, and you're opening up shafts where light can come in to get to the different layers. And here's a three-dimensional view. Both of these animations I'm showing you are from the tool, which we'll see in a minute. But same idea, you're coming in and you're pruning the height and the canopy diameter and harmonizing so everybody gets optimal conditions. And so we're, you know, really organic matter managers. You know, really we're harvesting sunlight. We're, you know, we work with photosynthesis, and we're trying to make tons and piles of organic matter in order to feed this system, like what you see on the bottom right. That's a traditional agroforest from Pohnpei. So, and when you get into that chaos of the accumulation step, you need to, you know, bring it down and then organize it creatively, however you choose to do it, whether it's in rows or curves or spirals, it doesn't matter, as long as it's a system that works for you and it doesn't inhibit your ability to manage your site, right? And so together, humans and their fungal allies, we create the human fungal slow burn. It's better than a fire. It retains more energy and more nutrition, and gets us to the abundant step. So here's an example. This is where Sophia and I actually got married in 2010. And before that wedding happened, the soil that was here, it's a part of the building process, got scraped away. And so we were left with just a big empty clay field. And so we went through an accumulation wave, and just recently in March, broke that down and reorganized it for the next step. So you can see kind of, you know, this is after whatever, 10 years or so, how it goes. And we keep the fungi fat and happy. That's our job, really. So with that, we'll take you to the tool. So I just want to say, you know, we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to cruise through this pretty quickly. But if you're really interested and you want to use the tool, you can go online. We have a video that's, I don't know, maybe more than an hour long, where we go pretty in depth into the tool and how it all works and all of that, as well as there being a support document. And so I highly recommend you to check that out. And with that said, you know, if you go to agroforestryx.com, you'll find this homepage, and you can read through the homepage, and it gives you kind of the overview, the do's and don'ts, and kind of the limitations of what this tool can and can't do for you, right? And then you'll make yourself an account, log in, and this is that stratification system I was talking about, the color-coded stratification. It's broken down for you. And you get to a project page, you can start to make projects. And so, you know, we didn't have a big fancy budget for this, so I'm sorry we don't have like a, you know, a map, automated map you can just go to and point and click. So you're going to have to actually dig around and find some of the information that you need, but it's not that hard. And so you need to know where you are. And if you don't, you can just say, I don't know, and press any. But otherwise, you know, you figure out how much rainfall, your elevation, your soil drainage, that sort of thing. Plug all that stuff in. And then if you are a part of one of the NRCS programs, you can click on that button to help you to adhere to their standard. Or if you're doing another project that you want to adhere to the regenerative design standard, you can click on that. Or if you just want to freewheel it and go for it, you can just do that. So then once you've done that, it's going to take you to a page where you can select a pattern. There's a bunch of different patterns, and there's info buttons. So you can click on the info button and then learn more about it in order to help you figure out which one's appropriate for your project or whatever. You can also adjust the path width. And then once you've done that, it's going to spit out a species list that's appropriate for your conditions that you laid out in the previous page, broken down by both time period and stratification. And so you will need to go through each one of those and pick at least one or however many species are recommended for you to select in order to comply with your standards. And so then once you get through that process, it will take you to another page where you can now adjust all the pruning parameters for the different species. So you can say, okay, when this species gets to this height, I want to prune it back to this height. And when it's this diameter, I want to prune it back to this diameter. And I want this many per area, right? So once you've got that all decided, now we get into the visualization. And so, you know, when we started on this project, we learned very quickly that one of the challenges for adopting agroforestry systems is the ability to visualize this kind of stuff, because it's like thinking in geological time, right? It's not, doesn't come easy to people. So we really tried to focus on that for now, to make it easier for people to visualize these systems so that they will adopt it. We want to make it easier for everybody to do this. This isn't necessarily rocket science. And actually, somewhere back in all of our history is somebody did this kind of stuff. So we're just remembering what we already know. So in the first visualization, you can see, you know, the different time periods, long-term species, medium-term species. We're not visualizing the short-term species because it's just too many dots and it makes a mess. But everybody knows how to grow vegetables, really. It's the integration with the trees that's the complicated part. So that's what we've done for you. And so you can break that down into, you know, the initial planting, a 3-year view and a 10-year view. If you scroll over these things, they're all live. And so it'll tell you which species is which dot, right? And then it also gives you a kind of calculation, a computation of canopy coverage. So you can get a sense of, you know, how you've designed it, how much of your area is covered and how often or for how long, right? And so then that'll take us into the side views where you get a 15-year view, and then the 3-dimensional version of the same, which you can rotate and pause and do whatever you need. And so then when you get through that, you get to the summary page. Now here, things are not yet written in stone. You can go back and make changes and whatnot. But what's really handy about this is that the numbers of individuals of species for your entire project have been summarized for you. And you essentially have a kind of shopping list here. You can take this and print it out and go to a nursery or whatever and say, okay, I need 15 of these and 12 of these and whatnot. And so you have the planting material that you need for your project, right? And so at the top, you can see you have an option. You can print it out as a PDF, or you can print it out as an Excel spreadsheet. And so, yeah, here you can see those 2 options. Very handy, kind of a good starting point for being able to manage your projects. And you know, that's basically it in a nutshell, and it's free. So why not, right? At least it's educational. You'll learn something, if nothing else. But I think you'll find it's actually pretty useful. So
yeah, and we also, you know, we have thought a lot about the financial side of it. We one day want it to be in the tool, but for now it's just something that we do for our clients. But we one day would love to have that as part of it. And obviously that's a huge part of the hurdle for doing these systems. They cost, you know, from our analysis, up to like twice as much to install. But the potential for the revenue is way more than twice as much over time if you are able to, you know, manage them and plant them, you know, in an intelligent way and have the right people, the right equipment, you know, the right processing. All that stuff has to be lined up, or else it's not going to work. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong, you know, like what, you know, the OK Farms people are doing. It's like you need, you know, people that are constantly thinking, what can we do? What can we do? And to synchronize your processing for that. And so anyways, we think a lot about that, and we think a lot about food security, and that's a whole nother presentation that we want to do, but we don't have time for that. But we just wanted to end with that. We, you know, we are a consulting company with Craig Elovich, and we offer planning, establishment, and management. And then our nonprofits, Homegrown Food Network and Agroforestry Net and Farm Center offer education and training on site and online. And we also do customized designs for people. And we're also doing research trials. And we're having a the webinar series is going to start in the end of August for small family farms. And so you can please sign up if you're interested at our website. So thank you, everybody.
Mahalo nui, Sophia and Neil. Such useful information that you've shared with us. The tool just seems so usable and just informative, especially for people just starting out, where it can seem overwhelming, the diversity of species, and when you're staring at a blank field, thinking about it becoming a forest can be overwhelming. So yeah, really awesome. I did post the link for agroforestryx.com in the chat, so feel free to check that out, and feel free to get in touch with Sophia and Neil through their websites. And yeah, just thank you guys so much for being here. All right, I'm just going to move us along. We have one last presenter tonight, and he's going to be cooking for us. This is a Hawaii Island cassoulet that Marcus came up with this recipe, and it went out in the email for those of you who registered the recipe, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it's going. So he's already in process of cooking. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to, just to introduce Marcus again. Marcus is the chef and cafeteria manager at Malama Lama Waldorf School in Kea'au on the Big Island, and he's very passionate about creating healthy and local dishes for children. And he also is a bit of a homesteader, if I understand correctly, has a bit of a homestead happening in Kea'au. So go ahead, Marcus.
Okay, so can everybody see my screen? Hello.
Yeah, looks beautiful.
Yeah, so we're gonna turn this stuff. Sorry, I'm gonna move my camera. Into this stuff.
Yum.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll cook and kind of talk at the same time. So right now I have my pan already heated. We're gonna start off with some salt pork that I raised and harvested and cured myself. Yeah, we got this pig from a friend. She's a, what was she? She was a potbelly that accidentally got bred by a feral pig. So we were gifted with her. And we raised her for about a year, 200 pounds of hanging weight, and basically filled up our chest freezer. Yeah, we're gonna brown this salt pork off. Turn this back up to medium high. Yeah, ideally like medium to medium high, just to get a nice good sear. You want it to be golden, not excessively charred because of the long cooking time. Yeah, while I'm doing that, I'm also gonna cut up some onions and carrots, celery, get that ready for this. A little bit of background on me. I'm born and raised in California. My mom is from Oahu, and basically as a kid, I've always had plans to move back to the islands. My family and I, we moved from California to Maui about 7.5 years ago. And we have been on Hawaii Island for the past 2.5 years. Yeah, really all I've done in the last 21 years of my life is food service. The past 10 years, I was an executive chef. I've worked at Tommy Bahama's, Roy's Restaurants, Sansei. Pre-pandemic, I was the executive chef at Hula Hula's in Hilo. And besides working as the cafeteria manager, kitchen manager at Malama Lama Waldorf, I'm about to open up a pizzeria in Hilo, in the Puainako Center. I'll still be working at the school because I don't feel like I'm done yet with that. I still have a lot to offer, I feel like. And I love seeing the kids. They're so happy and energetic every day. It's awesome. So hopefully that keeps me young. What about, so with this dish, it's a medieval French peasant dish. Generally, it's made up with a kind of excessive amount of like cured meats and either like pheasants, quails, ducks. I chose chicken for this dish because it's just readily available, and Puna Chicks is like 2 miles from my house. So we're using Puna Chicks, chicken, thighs. What else? Does everybody know what a pigeon pea is?
Good question.
So all of the plant species that we're using grows easily in an agroforestry setting. Yeah, these little things, I don't know how to, yeah. That's dry pigeon peas. We're gonna soak these overnight for at least 8 hours, and they're gonna double and triple in size. That soaking time, it allows for the absorption of water, which actually decreases the cook time. Yeah, and it just makes it for a more tender end result. Generally speaking, this dish is made with like white beans, cannellini beans. You can really substitute whatever you want, beans, lentils, even making it into a vegan dish or like pescatarian dish is very easy to alter. Yeah, and really if you wanted to like add greens to it, you can totally do that and make it more nutrient dense. It is extremely filling, being that it's primarily beans. Yeah, this dish would make like, I think 10 servings or so, and it reheats really well. You can do this in a crock pot. Yeah, I'm getting a little bit of gold on these. Some of the fat's rendering out. And I'm just about to take this out and switch to adding my chicken thighs in. When we add the chicken thighs, we're gonna do it skin side down. I've already seasoned the skin. You do want to season both sides of the meat. And when you're seasoning any dish, try to season it in layers. So you're not gonna add, I think like this recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of Hawaiian sea salt. Not gonna be added all at once. Yeah, it's gonna be added little by little. Yeah, and feel free to like adjust this recipe. Yeah, easily adding in like ginger and turmeric to give it that like Asian flair. And can everybody hear that really awesome sizzle?
Yes, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it smells really good in here. I've been cooking all day.
Yes, thank you for cooking this twice for us. So you have your finished one and your one in process.
I enjoy the whole thing. So yeah, I really like cooking. I like being able to share the food, share the story, share the process.
Yes. And you got the camera angle really, it's on point. We can see everything really well. It's perfect.
A little bit. So the chicken is probably going to need at least another 3 or so minutes. Does anybody have any questions that I can answer?
And I did just share the PDF of the recipe in the chat for those who didn't see that yet, if you wanted to follow along or download it for later. It's a, yeah, PDF. Any questions for Marcus?
Does anybody live near Orchid Land? I have 2 big pots of beans.
Yeah, does anyone want to go over for dinner?
Yeah.
Marcus, how did you come up with this? This is one of the more complicated recipes that we've had on our webinars. And yeah, I'm just curious, what inspired you to come up with this recipe?
So with culinary education, I'm classically French trained through Le Cordon Bleu. I also took culinary at Kapiolani Community College. Yeah, I love French cuisine. Most of my restaurant experience has been like fine dining, fast casual, sushi. But I really love the fusion aspect of this dish. And yeah, really the inspiration is what can grow here. And yeah, what I think everything is like, besides the garlic, is within like a 20 or so mile radius from my house.
So awesome.
Yeah, or things that I can grow myself, like the bay leaves, the thyme, parsley, the chicken that was used in the chicken broth, Hawaiian chili peppers, the pork, that's all from my property.
Hyper local.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like how you
It's a-
substituted the cannellini beans with the pigeon pea. We don't really grow cannellini beans here, but we do grow pigeon pea. And so that's something to think about when we are trying to add more local foods to our diets, is replacing 1 or 2 ingredients with something that is grown locally. And maybe it's not a typical island dish, but how can we incorporate our island foods and plants into our diets in a more regular way? And I really like that you were able to do that. And yeah. And I'm also interested to see how you incorporate the Māmaki into your recipe.
Oh, it's actually really good. So as far as the cacao, I'm actually using it more as a spice than anything. Typically, this dish is made with like nutmeg and cloves. So we're substituting the cinnamon for those other sweet spices. And then the cacao, it doesn't really like melt away. It does soften during the cooking process, but you still get solid pieces of cacao, so I didn't grind it. So actually when you're chewing in the dish, when you're eating the dish, you'll get like these little bitter bites, bittersweet bites, and it's kind of amazing. I really hope some of you try it out, if not all of you.
Yeah, I can't wait to try it. We do have a question in the chat box, Marcus. Lisa asks, Chef, what would be a comparable local vegetarian or vegan protein substitute? Good question.
Even like with even if you just took out the meat with this dish, the pigeon peas, I believe, are actually pretty high in protein content. I don't remember like the exact omega-3s or 6s or whatever, but generally speaking, beans are high in protein and fiber. You could also throw in quinoa easily, but I don't think I've ever seen that grown locally. Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, I wonder if you could make like maybe even falafel patties out of the pigeon peas, or some people have made hummus out of like jackfruit seeds. You could maybe make a falafel out of the jackfruit seeds. Even kalo, I could see taro. You could make some taro patties. But it's so true. It's packed with protein already with the beans.
I really wanted to take the beans out and use some ulu, but I didn't have any ready on my tree. Okay, so once the chicken comes out, we're gonna save that for a little bit later. So there's not a whole lot of fat left in the pan, which is good. If there's an excess amount, I would advise to drain off like everything except for about 1 or 2 tablespoons. Otherwise, your end result's going to be very, very greasy and not as delicious as it's intended. Yeah, we're going to saute up the onion, celery, carrots. And the garlic. And even the cacao nibs, they're gonna go in, get a little toasty. Yeah, I also chose this dish because most local people that I've ever talked to, you don't have it or you don't see it often. Yeah, even in like most restaurants, they're not going to serve this dish. Yeah, making it unique and, like you said, very hyper local. And I personally haven't eaten a cassoulet in years, so kind of for me, it's semi-selfish.
So those are the dried bananas that you're chopping up, right?
But yeah, I'm just doing a quick rough chop on that. And then I need to chop up the Māmaki leaves. And really, you don't have to. I just found that some of them were a little bit on the large side. And just to make it more evenly distributed, that flavor.
Yeah, I love seeing you cook with Māmaki. I haven't ventured into that realm yet. I drink Māmaki tea, and I've heard you can eat the leaves in salads and things like that, the fresh leaves. But I love that you're using a native plant in an entree like this. Really awesome.
Really, really good. I'm gonna add the cinnamon, the beans, the banana, the Māmaki, the chilies, the bay leaves.
2 chili peppers. Ooh.
Well, so typically French cuisine is kind of heavy on the black pepper. I don't grow that. I don't really know anybody that has local. I'm not sure if OK Farms is doing that yet, but that'd be really cool.
Yeah, if they could put it in their spice road, that would be awesome.
And then we're gonna add the chicken stock. I prefer using homemade chicken stock because of the gelatin content. So during the roasting process, the gelatin will actually come up to the top. The gelatin and proteins in the stock and broth will come up and make a skin, and that skin will turn a little crispy and give this dish more texture. Otherwise, it's just like soft, mushy beans. If you're gonna do vegan, yeah, you can leave out the chicken stock and substitute even just water, veggie broth. Yeah, so the salted pork goes back in. We're gonna bring this to a simmer and cover it and let it simmer for 45 minutes, and that'll make the beans tender. After that, not necessary It's still edible if you were to eat it straight off the stove like this. But generally cassoulets are baked until you form that skin. And we're gonna bake it at 325 degrees. Yeah, for the purpose of this, the time, I'm gonna pretend.
Ooh, look at that.
Yeah, I'm gonna pretend that this is on a simmer, nice and tender. It's gonna go in the oven uncovered for approximately 2 hours. Yeah. When it's ready, I don't know if you'll be able to hear this, but there's like crispy, crunchy. Can you hear?
That's
any
how
of
you
it?
know it's ready. No,
Yeah.
can't quite hear it.
And the texture of the beans itself. Has anybody had like a risotto? It should be that kind of texture where it's not extremely loose. Yeah, but not extremely stiff either, somewhere in between. Yeah, for those who are using like a bone broth or a meat stock, that gelatin, like I said, it helps create the crust on this dish. During the roasting process, every like 20 or 30 minutes, you're gonna actually go in the oven, remove this pan, and break the crust, allowing more of the liquid and gelatin to come to the top. And that creates a thicker crust. Every time you break it, it'll get a little bit thicker. But yeah, like I said, it's not necessary to roast. After the first 45 minutes of cooking on the stove, the beans are already tender and soft. You can eat it just like that. Yeah, cook it in a crock pot while you're at work. And as soon as you get home, you have dinner. Ta-da. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have an Instapot myself, and I think this might be a good one for the Instapot as well. Mahalo to all of our presenters for being here this evening. If you are wanting to get in touch with anyone who presented this evening or with Center for Getting Things Started, feel free to reach out. Such amazing knowledge and information shared this evening. I hope that you all feel a little bit more empowered to walk away and try agroforestry on your aina, and to cook with some of our local products here. And yeah, just mahalo nui. We really appreciate you being here, and please enjoy the rest of the food summit.